Okay, wish it'll be good. Okay, I should be all ready to go now. I want to welcome everybody to our Sabbath meeting. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you for your continued watch care over us. We ask and pray that you would be with us during these sacred hours, that we might not only receive the blessing that you want to give to us, but that we might desire it, that we might come to a clearer understanding of the work that you would have us to do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Someone can just say yes.
Yes.
Great. So we've got people internationally joining us today, and I have said on the chat, if only IPR members can use the chat, please. And I'd prefer if IPR members get involved in the discussion and everyone else can just listen in. Hope that's okay. It was an IPR meeting, and the minister was gracious enough to open it up internationally because there seemed to be a demand for that. Okay, so last week, I don't know how many people have watched or listened to that study. We tried to address the following questions. It was actually, I think we ended up managing to do one question. It was about the Sunday Law Waymark, when the Sunday Law Waymark is, and what event that would be. I guess they're synonymous terms. So I'm just going to go back to the whiteboard that we had last week. So hopefully it's coming on your screen. You can see that there were some various answers that we got, and just put some names. Those. That doesn't mean that it's indicated that Waymark. Just want to make that clear. It's just those the people that spoke, and everybody seemed confident, if I can say it that way, or settled in, that the marker to look for with respect to the Sunday Law Waymark is related to voting. That seemed to be the consensus position. I couldn't get anybody else to give a different position on that. Can anybody just say yes if they can confirm that that's their recollection of last week? Just first person put the audio on and just say yes.
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 Okay, so I want to just point out that if you go to inspiration, the fact that it speaks about a Sunday law our position may or may not be in contradiction to what Ellen White says. Now, the reason I say may or may not, at a surface level, it certainly seems to me to be contradictory, because it's not any law that has been passed, it's about voting. So that's one point. And the reason why I said it may not be in contradiction to the spirit of prophecy is that when you read, say, The Great Controversy, or perhaps a compilation, or some of her 1888 material work, you can get the impression that the Sunday law issue that she speaks of, the Sabbath Sunday struggle, is relatively straightforward to understand. And what makes it I think what doubles down on that idea of simplicity is the models that Ellen White uses when you go to the books of Daniel and Revelation, particularly Revelation 13 and Daniel 2 and Daniel 3. When you talk about, when we speak about setting up of the image, when we speak about the creation of the image of the beast from Daniel and Revelation, it seems to be relatively simple to come to the position that it's to do with the law that's going to be put into place that's going to trample upon people's freedoms. So I want to suggest that a more comprehensive and detailed review of Ellen White's writing indicates that it's not that straightforward. And sometimes she speaks about things in a convoluted way, if I can put it. She speaks about, for instance, imagery surrounding the close of probation. She sometimes uses that imagery, that language, in relationship to the Sunday law. And then she sometimes uses the Sunday law terminology or phraseology in relationship to what waymark or what dispensation. Anybody have any thoughts?
Could you repeat the question, please?
So if I summarize first, people seem to have gravitated to the understanding that the Sunday law waymark is related to voting. And we may have a quick discussion of why that is. But that on the surface to me seems contradictory to Ellen White's statements or definition of the Sunday law. Is that okay so far?
Yes.
Okay, so I said it's on the surface, I'm going to say it is contradictory because there's no laws involved at all when you look at our version of the Sunday law compared to what Ellen White's version is. And then I said it may not be contradictory, and the reason is because Ellen White uses very simplistic modeling. She goes to the plains of Dura, and she goes to the image of the beast, taken from Daniel and Revelation, the creation of that image. And she takes those, and when you look at those and the way she comments on them, it seems relatively straightforward, the Sunday law issue and what's involved around it. And when you go to Revelation 14 and it speaks about receiving the mark of the beast, she will define what that mark is, and it all seems subtly simple. Is that okay so far?
Yes.
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 Okay. So what I then added was that if I were to take 3 dispensations, I'm probably going to answer my own question now. What would the middle one be? What would the first one be? Anyone?
You mean like the
Are you
first, second, and third angel?
Was that Alyssa? Can you repeat that?
Yes. So the only thing that makes sense to me is the first group would be the first angel, then the second angel, then the third angel, but I could be way wrong.
Your audio.
Are you looking at
With
Boston?
the dispensations.
No.
Angels aren't dispensations. Nope. Boston isn't a dispensation. I think it's a waymark.
Would that be plowing?
Okay. So instead of trying to use an imagery, we'll use our normal verbiage. So I'll answer the question. I'll answer it then. If that's the Sunday law, what's this one? Close of probation. And this one? This one we might not know the answer to.
That is just the agitation of. Oh, okay.
I didn't catch what you said. I'm sorry.
agitation.
Daniel said agitation.
Okay, good. So we've got agitation, Sunday law, close of probation. So all I said in my initial comment, and some people didn't understand what I meant, was Ellen White's focus in her prophetic writings really is about the Sunday law. This is the focus. And the question is, what is this waymark? So if you go to Ellen White's writings, what she sometimes does, and this is what I was saying can be confusing, is she takes the language that's associated with the close of probation here, she takes the language, and sometimes she applies that language to the Sunday law. I'm going to just call it the language. Or the terminology. And that can be confusing because you think she's speaking about one subject and she's actually speaking about something else. So that can add a layer of confusion. And over the years that I've studied the subject, it's confused many, many people. And that's both within the movement and before I came into the movement. So sometimes when Ellen White is speaking about the agitation now, she will use Sunday law terminology or language, speaking about the agitation. So I'm going to call that one terminology. Same words. So we need to know about the agitation because the agitation is what's going on in the world around us that tells us that the Sunday law is imminent. And then obviously when you're in the Sunday law period, those events will tell you that the close of probation is imminent. That goes without saying. But the confusion in the spirit of prophecy. So all of this is the spirit of her Sunday law. But when she speaks about the Sunday law, sometimes she uses close of probation terminology. And when she speaks about the agitation, sometimes, sorry about that, she speaks about, she uses, Sunday law terminology. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Okay. So when you take all of that into account, Ellen White's writings aren't such I don't want to say they're not reliable, but they're not sort of the go-to place. They're not so straightforward. They're not as simple as we think when we try to look around us today and try to understand whether or not we are in the Sunday law or in the agitation. I can say with confidence we're not in the close of probation. For sure, we're not there. We did agree, hopefully, last week. I go back there. So the only point I was making on all of that is that we now say that voting, I'll underline it here, is the marker for the Sunday law. And we agreed that we were not at the loud cry. So I'm going to circle the loud cry here, and we're not here. For sure. Everybody okay with that? We're not at the loud cry.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the reason why I'm saying we're not at the loud cry is because we're not crying. Now, that seems to be an area of contention, which I'm not going to address today, but I want to address at some future presentation, at least discuss it with people, why we seem perturbed by this notion that there's no longer a loud cry. So I want to state unequivocally, there is a loud cry. There has to be one because we've had so many of them in the past. So that's point one. And if there is a loud cry, the question is, what is its nature and its properties, so that we can better understand what it's all about. And then the reason I phrased it that way is because I've heard it phrased many times now that because we're not anybody, there can't be a loud cry. How variation on the theme of that. Go ahead.
I was just, your mic has cut out a few times just briefly, and I'm not sure why. I don't think it's anything you're doing, because I can see that it's still open.
Sometimes people's mics have cut out on my end as well. Maybe it's just my internet's not very good. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If it cuts out, someone just shout out and say repeat it, please.
Okay.
Because I can't tell from my end. Okay. And
Elder Parminder, could you repeat the last 5 minutes or so? What you spoke, we weren't able to understand what you were saying.
Okay, I'll try to summarize. I just want to add on that screen, November the 5th, the election was not the loud cry. I don't believe it was. That's what I'm saying that. So let me try to summarize what I'm saying. Point one, there seemed to be a consensus understanding. Let me go to here. Yep. I'm going to call it a consensus. It doesn't mean it's a movement position. It's just a consensus from IPR members for IPR that voting is I'm going to call it the marker or identifier for the Sunday law. So that's point one. And I'm saying that seems to run contrary to what Ellen White's imagery of the Sunday law is. Regardless of the subject, she seems to infer that it's a law, not, I'm going to call it, we'll just say vote. It's not about voting. It's about a law that's going to be introduced. And the introduction of that law, I don't want to define how she phrases it or or how she would explain or understand it. To do that, I think we should go into her writings to try to delve deeper into that. But as a minimum, it would be a federal issue. Its rights. I think those two items are pretty.
Could you repeat again?
Are pretty firm.
Could
yes.
you repeat?
So I'm going to call it the movement. This is the movement's position, and Spirit of Prophecy says it's a law. We've said it's voting, and Ellen White says it's law, and I'm saying there's a federal and a state issue with respect to that law. Ellen White seems to infer that there's going to be an agitation over a subject. She defines what the subject is, and then there's going to be laws passed, and those laws will be the markers for the Sunday law, the waymark of the Sunday law. So there's a definite difference between what we now see and what Ellen White speaks of. And if we can really come to an understanding of this fundamental difference, we will begin to see why the Adventist Church, according to our understanding, would never be able to find or locate or to see the Sunday law, because the marker that they're looking for is something substantially different, regardless of the subject. I'm not saying it's the subject of Sunday or human rights. I'm saying that Adventism, based upon Ellen White's writing, believes it's a law, and we're saying it's not a law. At least the people that spoke last week. Is that okay, Gloria?
Yes.
Okay. So just want to go back to this point. I hope everybody understood what this little graphic is depicting. So I said that Ellen White uses Sunday law terminology when she's referring to a dispensation that is pre-Sunday law. I don't know if we're all aware of that. So she will speak about obeying the Sunday law, which means
You repeat that, please.
it,
Repeat that,
order to allow Ellen White will speak about the Sunday law and complying to the law of the land, which stands in contradiction to the great test. And it's quite clear to find that in her writings. And unless you're aware of the context of what she's speaking about, it's hard to understand what she's saying. And that's an example of taking Sunday law terminology, we'll call it law, and bringing it into the dispensation that precedes the Sunday law. Sorry, I realized what I was doing. And bringing it into the history of the agitation. So there are going to be laws in the history that precedes the Sunday law. And Ellen White will call them Sunday laws, or laws related to Sunday sacredness. And she will say that we should not resist or fight those laws. What I've just said, is that new to anybody?
No.
Okay. So I've not nobody has said yes, it is new to them. No one said anything on the chat, I don't believe. So I'm going to say that most of us are familiar with what I've just said. That Ellen White's going to speak about obeying the Sunday law, which would on the surface mean that you're going to receive the mark of the beast. So there's a contradiction there. And she uses Sunday law terminology when she makes those statements. And I'm saying that what she's doing is speaking about the agitation of the Sunday law before the great test, and she's going to be using Sunday law terminology as she describes the events in the agitation. So I hope that's clear to everybody. What does that mean? If we take that model, what does that mean? Does anybody want to have a venture and walk us through the logic?
Christina put a comment.
Okay, So when I say what does anybody, what does that mean? How does it help us? What we do is we take that model that we've just discussed, and I know we haven't gone to any Spirit of Prophecy quotes. We take various aspects of that model, set up a framework, and then if we're confident that's in agreement with the Spirit of Prophecy, we can then apply that and learn some things about our own history. She's talking, when you say, Christina, you say no, what's the no to what? She said, no, she's talking about laws that control the conscience. No, she's not speaking about, you mean no, she's not speaking about the Sunday law? I don't know if Christina can hear me or she can't speak. I can't remember what my previous question is, Christina. You're going to have to either type it out or speak it out. Okay, I won't be able to help then. I'm sorry. So, anybody want to venture to walk us through the logic? What's the marker of the subject? The Sunday law. What are we supposed to do with the Sunday law? Keep it or obey or disobey? Anyone?
I guess if we're not supposed, this is Alyssa, if we're not supposed to resist, then I guess it implies that we obey.
Okay. So we obey, we don't resist. And one more point.
In your presentation about the voting, you said it was our religious duty to vote.
Yes, I said that. This is the Sunday law. This is the agitation. So in the Sunday law, what will there be? Laws?
Laws,
Agitation, what will
yeah.
there be? What laws?
Sunday observance, civil shutdown of the government on Sunday.
Why can't you just call it Sunday laws?
Okay.
You just said laws and you said something to do with Sundays.
Sunday observance. So, yeah, Sunday laws.
Okay, so before the Sunday law, there are Sunday laws. If we're okay with that. So we're going to pick up this and we're going to pick up this. We're going to, for sake of time, we're going to leave the middle one. So what's the problem? If I'll just call that 1, 2, and 3. No problem with number 1. That's straightforward, hopefully. The subject is the Sunday law. That's the marker. Number 3. What's the problem with number 3? What's the complexity or the difficulty?
State versus federal issue?
What do you say, Bob?
A state laws versus a federal law, federal issue.
Okay, so you're saying that these will be state and this will be federal. Is that what you're just saying?
That's where I'm leaning, yeah.
Okay, do you know as a fact or you're just assuming?
That's how we've seen it so far.
Well, now we're talking about Ellen White. Can't go to what we've seen today. If you do that, you're breaking all the rules.
Can I, good morning, happy Sabbath. This is Susan, Elder Parminder.
I just want to, before one moment, Susan. I just want to make sure that I get this tied up with Bob. Do you see that, Bob, that you can't go to our own history to define Ellen White's modeling, and you can't go to our own history to understand what the truth is? Do you agree on those 2 points?
Yes, I do. I was just trying to look at the direction that things are moving and trying to understand it today, but I understand that we have to understand it at the level prophetically and looking at the spirit of prophecy and being in one accord with it.
Okay, because I want to mark the Sunday law as the number of volcanoes that are happening all across the world, or how or what the sea level is, because I could mark the Sunday law that way, and I wouldn't have to go to a state or federal issue. I could see how many tornadoes are hitting the states.
You just cut
We
out.
could come up with
Could
lots
you
of
repeat?
examples. Yep. We could go to lots of examples today of what's going on all around us to mark what a Sunday law is. So unless Ellen White's specific about it goes from state to federal, we can't use those things as markers which are currently happening for us to know whether or not they're accurate markers. That was the point I made with Bob. So if that's okay, Susan.
Yes, I was kind of having trouble marrying the idea of obeying and not resisting something, because when you're doing that, for instance, if you go along with, you mentioned the tide rising or whatever, or volcanoes erupting, if you just act like business is normal, how does that present any agitation to the population?
So the obey, not resist. I said I'm not going to tackle that. So that's where the big black dots were. So
I know.
I'm going to sidestep your question. It's a big issue in society. Number 2 is all that Ellen White says is don't make a big issue of it. So I just want to leave it at that for the moment. What that means for us may not be that straightforward. So I just want to go back to point 3, if we're okay. What's the problem if this is the model that we have?
How do you differentiate what the waymark for Sunday law is? If there's laws on either side, then how do we know what the marker is?
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I deliberately, and I'm not guessing this, used plural in the Sunday law dispensation here. I said there will be multiple Sunday laws. I think that's clear enough from Ellen White's writings, that they will, if they write one law one day, because of compliance or a change of situation, they will either amend the law, or they will put an addition to it, or they will do a whole.
Could you repeat?
They could
repeat.
be contested, and it could be, yep. So I've said there are multiple Sunday laws. One thing when we speak about the law, we all know a little bit about the 3 branches. So we have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary, and each one of those 3 departments is connected to the law. And the law of the land is the Constitution. So when there's a law that's being implemented, it will receive challenges, and when you receive a challenge, that will in effect be either and they get sustained, there will be a modification or a rewriting of the law. So that's why I put multiple laws. So I think it was Alyssa that said the problem with number 3 is if all of these are to do with laws and they're all dealing with the subject of Sunday, how do you know what that waymark there is? Because you're going to have Sunday law 1, Sunday law 2, Sunday law 3, and Sunday law 4. We've got 4 Sunday laws. And how do you know that when you've gone, actually, let me do it this way. We'll just call that Sunday law star. How do you know that you've gone from Sunday law 2 to 3, and in between it, there was another Sunday law that was the marker? And the problem is Ellen White doesn't tell you. She doesn't explain explicitly what the difference between that one, Sunday law star, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 is. So that's Spirit of Prophecy. And this is the movement today. What's the subject?
Voting.
Yeah, voting.
Voting, not the third angel. I changed the word to subject as opposed to marker to trick you. Oh dear, I didn't like that. So, voting. Number 2, not resist. This, when I say this is the movement, this is Adventism, the church. So this church is not resisting. And number 3, we have the same dynamic. Agitation and the Sunday law. And what's the marker? What we're going to put here now?
I'm going to say November 5th.
No, you've got to go back, go to the left side of the board.
So the
There's
law.
no dates. There's nothing. There's no dates there.
Okay. So then I guess, I don't know. Somebody.
Maybe Trump coming back elected.
There's no name on. If you go to the left of the chart, there's no names. There's no events. Nothing.
Voting. Voting.
Voting.
We're okay. And so we have vote 1, vote 2, vote 3, vote 4, and then that's the vote. So the summary of all of that is, in Ellen White's paradigm, there's lots of Sunday laws. And in our paradigm, there's lots of votes. So hopefully we can all see the problem now. We're trying to find the waymark or the date. Last week we had, I'm going to call it 4. Maybe there wasn't 4. Let's go with 4 votes. Anybody want to venture?
So you mean like what we had already come to the conclusion of, like the first one being the whole year, the second one being a specific date, or you mean like
Can't go for the whole year
ideas?
model because
That's too big.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first primary, we'd we found out started January 15th. Well, we didn't last week, but we did last night.
So you want to go to the Republican primaries as votes?
It's both the Republican and the Democratic primaries. It was the state by state primaries. They began January. Ooh, I think it was 15th.
Okay.
But January nonetheless.
Next. Let's get through these quickly, even if we skip some.
The second was at January 23rd in New Hampshire.
What's that?
That was another
So I'm gonna
primary?
because there's only 4, I'm gonna jump into July for the Republican primary.
So
And then we'll have
the
November.
January
and then
date you gave, that was just the state primary, wasn't it?
What
Gloria,
Gloria
what-
gave was the state. So January 15th, that was when Iowa began voting. So that's when all the states began.
Yes.
So I mean, we can list out
No, that's
dozens
just
of states.
that's just the primaries.
Right. So then the second one could be the RNC in July.
That's the RNC. Next one.
If you put
No.
the RNC, would you not have to then put the DNC?
No,
Who said no?
Christine,
Why no,
Because the-
Christine?
because the next 2 would be the November 5th election and then the electorate election.
Maybe there's more than 4. Why don't
Oh.
you want to put DNC with it?
I guess you can, because I was thinking there was 4 numbers instead of 5. Sorry,
Okay.
I looked at it. I missed.
No, you did 4 because I was trying to make it simple, but people have given me extra ones, so I don't want to stifle creativity. So that was August, yes? I can't remember the date.
Yeah, August.
19th through the 22nd.
And then November 5th. Then
The electorate, is that
somebody can tell me the date.
January 6th.
January 7th. January 6th was the last time. This year is the 7th.
I think it's on a specific date, isn't it?
It's always January 6th, except on Sunday. I think.
It's always the 6th. Is it the 7th or the 6th?
I was thinking it was dependent on like the second or the first
Someone can
Monday
just look
or
it up.
Tuesday of the month or something.
I'll leave it until someone confirms.
January 6th, 2025.
Okay.
Sorry,
so,
everyone.
So January 6th. So we've got 5 votes there to begin with. So if we had 5 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, coincidentally, how would we, if we were just to go with this, and we would just say that 2024 is the year. And I think that's based upon several news articles that have said 2024 is the year of elections across the world. And some presentations have been done with respect to that. And people have gravitated to 2024 being the time period where we would expect the Sunday law. So Out of those 5, how would you know which one is the marker for the Sunday law if we were going to go with those 5? How do you define what you're looking for? Anyone?
The mark of the beast.
Okay, so oops. So we'd be looking for the mark of the beast.
And the shipwreck of democracy in America.
Shipwreck.
The fall of democracy in America.
So we've got 5 options, and the question is which one is voting star, or which we call the Sunday law. So if we've got that far, so Aaron has said the mark of the beast and the fall of democracy. So we'd have to go to one of those 5 and say which one.
It has to be November.
Has those properties. The beast. Where are you getting that? Are you getting that from Revelation 13? Is that where would you go for that 14?
Yeah, 13, 14 really, because it's the people that get the mark of the beast. It's the population of America. It's not 12. Yeah.
So I thought Revelation 13 and 14, the mark of the beast, and obviously there's many spirit of prophecy places. And then you said shipwreck, and then you said the fall of democracy. And where are you getting that from?
Acts 27. So that ship represents the whole of America in one model.
Okay, I'm
So
going to
it has
let
to
you
be
get
a-
away with Acts 27 for the moment. I might have to come back on that. So, anyone else?
Elder Parminder, how
Yes.
about Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis?
Quintus Maximus.
No, Quintus
Oh.
Fabius Maximus Gurgis.
Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis. And what does that mean?
That would be Elder Terry study, July 15th to the 18th. Yeah.
Okay, I don't mean that. I don't.
Oh,
I know.
it's the Fabius, the voting part of that. The Faba beans.
Okay, so you're picking up F equals voting. Is that right? F equals voting.
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking for, out of those 5 votes, how do we know which is the vote? So where does Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis come from? Where are you getting that from? Where do we find that?
The history of Pyrrhus.
Just spell that for me. P-Y.
Pyrrhus.
Okay, Pyrrhus. And where do we find Pyrrhus? Anybody? First person.
You mean in the Diadochi Wars, you mean?
Okay, so I'm not the date. We find Pyrrhus in the Diadochi Wars. And where's the Diadochi Wars found? Looking for a Bible verse.
Nowhere.
Must be somewhere. We made it up then.
Well, World War
Daniel
One and
8?
World War Two. World War One and World War Two is not in the Bible either.
Who
Is it
spoke?
Daniel 8?
Besides Aaron?
Yeah.
In Daniel, it's skipped. It was noise and it was skipped. So it's not actually in Daniel. You can't look it up and say, when it skips those generals and it just says there's 4. There's not actually. There's like 25, and Pyrrhus was involved in those ones that were skipped. So it's actually not in the Bible.
But it's in the verse. It's in that history, or in those verses that's where we would go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. Okay.
The reason why I say that, like you said, it's not there. We could go to. I know you're going to argue that the mark of the beast is in Revelation 13 and 14, but in Acts 27, all there is a ship that gets smashed up. But you've made the shipwreck of democracy, and you went from the USA to democracy. So you've put in something there that isn't there already. So
yes,
it's not
that
original
intent.
Yeah, so it's not far-fetched to say that Daniel 8, does anybody can give me the verse or verses? That there's a history in Daniel 8, and that history goes from
say Alexander to the 4 generals or something like that.
Okay, so we'll call it the 4 generals to Alexander the Great. And in that history, Pyrrhus is found, and Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis is found there as well.
Yes.
Yep. So, anybody want to comment? Anybody found the verse?
Yes, if I may.
Who's this?
Manuel.
Manuel. Can you give me the verse?
For which one?
That's on the board. Daniel 8 what?
Oh.
Verse 8.
8. Verse 8.
8. Manuel, before you speak, I just want to go back to Gloria, if that's okay, Gloria. So you've got Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis. We've got voting. I'm okay with that. But that voting, there's 5 of them. Aaron hasn't explained the mark of the beast, if it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but he says that's the marker. I'm okay with that. Shipwreck of democracy. So it's shipwreck of the ship. He gets that from Acts 27, but Elder Tess is the.
Could you repeat
that information?
Could you repeat?
To us, we didn't know that it was voting. So,
Elder Parminder, could you repeat?
2, shipwreck of, shipwreck of democracy, Acts 27. Aaron has taken that from Elder Tess, and Elder Tess, I don't think, has defined that the shipwreck of that boat was some voting event in 2024. We've added all of that information since that study, since the last 6 years, if we can say that. So Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis, that's taken from the story of Pyrrhus. So that's where we can get voting from. I'm okay with that, Gloria. How would you mark if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 with Quintus, with the person, that general?
Because the Quintus is July.
Sorry, does Quintus mean 5th or does it mean July?
It means 5.
So if it means 5th, I'm going to say it means 5th of November. I don't think Quintus means July. I think it can be used for 5th month, but it means 5th.
Quintus.
Okay,
Quintus
we know
means
there's a disagreement.
5.
Who's speaking?
But also means July because it's
Who's speaking?
according to
Who's speaking?
Raquel.
Raquel, please don't participate. I did ask if you don't mind, but I'll let you finish your question now. But only IPR participation, if you don't mind. What's the point you're making? Raquel?
Who, me? Yes, I wanted to say that quintus means 5 because in the
We know
Roman
that.
calendar,
We know that. We know that. We know all the arguments about 5 and 7. I'm just asking Gloria where she wants to get voting 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4, or 5 from the name. So I wanted to ask Gloria. So Gloria says it's from the name Quintus, which is number 5. So I'm not asking to defend the logic there. She's going to make number 5 July. I get that. Anything else, Gloria?
No, no.
Okay, so I'll just say then the other one is we have July, which is the 5th month. We have voting, and then the last point that you're going to make is that it's the maximum flood. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a bit more. Okay, so you've got July is the subject of voting, and it's the maximum flood, and flood means what? What is flood? We'll start with Gloria, and anybody else can help her after that or add.
Rome?
What is Rome is the flood?
I think it's a symbol of Rome.
Sure. Who's that?
Linda.
Linda. Flood is a symbol of Rome, but that's not going to help us in our study because that's just going to say maximum America.
So
Is
flooded of, oh, go ahead. You go
Is
ahead.
it misinformation, disinformation, a flood?
So we had the maximum amount of disinformation in July. I'm not an expert on this subject, but I can assure you that was not the maximum amount of disinformation. I don't know if there was any disinformation in July at the RNC, or not that much. So I would argue that it's not disinformation because it didn't max out then.
Elder Parminder.
Yes.
Could it be that they won House, Senate, and presidential election?
Are you building that from this name?
Yes, maximum flood.
Okay, then if you're going to do maximum flood, you've got to do the quintus and the voting bit as well. Unless you're going to say 5th of November, like Aaron just did. You can't take bits of it. You've got to take the whole package.
So if you run your symbol through the Bible, flood in Daniel 9 is the persecution by pagan Rome, and flood in Revelation 12 is the persecution by papal Rome, and it's linked to religious doctrine. But it's actually the persecution.
Okay, so we've got a biblical definition of the flood, which is persecution. I just put there for people's reference. The Bible says flood equals persecution.
I have a crazy idea.
You said something else, Aaron?
Just giving the references. Sorry, no, you're right. I added, it can be from religious doctrine. Yeah, the religious doctrine is not the flood. The persecution is the flood. Yeah.
Okay, so the religious doctrine causes the persecution. Lena?
Yeah, I just had a crazy idea, which is the order of his name, Quintus Flavius Maximus Gorgias. So the 5th, the voting, and then follows maximum flood, which is the trifecta.
Okay, I agree with you. I'm going to suggest that when we did here, what was V star? What does V star mean? V is voting.
The most important one, the one that you have to.
The most important. When you take the name, we don't use the phrase most important. What phrase do we use? What word do we use, Gloria? Not most important. We use
Waymarks.
not Waymarks.
No?
The name.
Oh.
Maximum.
Maximums. So the most important one is the maximum one. So the maximum what? What's the flood mean? If you're going to use, Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges, what are you saying the flood is?
Maximum vote.
No, we're going to tell what maximum means. Maximum what? Oh, what did you say?
The vote. Maximum vote.
That's what it seems to me.